9. Dogs maul woman to death. One afternoon in November 2019 in Warren County, Ohio, police responded to a call about a possible drug overdose. When they arrived at the scene, they met Mary's husband, Dale, and his son in the driveway. The pair had returned home to the gruesome scene and Mary unresponsive. Mary's body bore obvious signs of severe injury, including cuts and puncture wounds. Police also found bloody towels and several changes of clothing, showing that Mary had repeatedly tried to clean herself up and get dressed. Dale told officers that one of Mary's two Great Danes, who were in an enclosed deck area, was vicious. He also said that because of her small size, Mary wouldn't have been able to fight the dog off if he attacked her. It appears as though the mortally wounded woman managed to get the canines outside, but didn't realize the severity of her injuries, possibly because she was on numerous prescriptions and was struggling with a drinking problem at the time. Mary's children did not buy the explanation that Mary was attacked by her dogs and bled to death, and urged law enforcement to reopen the case, claiming they had telling evidence that there was more to their mother's death than investigators believed. A toxicology report showed that there was no alcohol in Mary's system when she died, contradicting her husband's claims that she was a daily drinker. But police maintained their position that Mary's dogs mauled her to death and that she had the time and opportunity to dial 911, but chose not to for reasons she ultimately took to the grave. 8. Killer Camel. Pamela Weaver was an animal lover who raised goats, kangaroos, emus, rabbits and more at her Australian home, so it was no surprise when her husband Noel bought her a pet camel for her 60th birthday, even though most people might think of it as an unusual gift. She reportedly formed a strong bond with the camel, but he developed a track record of erratic behavior and a habit of trying to straddle other creatures at the farm. He eventually turned this tendency towards Mrs. Weaver while she was in the middle of cooking dinner and drinking tea. Noel arrived at the residence to find his wife dead on the floor with hoof prints on her face and the camel running loose on the patio. Queensland detective Craig Gregory and camel expert Chris Hill concluded that the then 10-month-old pet killed Camilla when he tried to mount her, knocking her over in the process and then stomping on her. Hill, who has over 20 years of experience working with camels, told the press that while the animals are typically non-aggressive, they can become dangerous when raised as pets. Pamela's family decided against euthanizing the camel, and Noel publicly expressed his forgiveness for the creature at his wife's funeral. 7. Chimp versus human. Sandra Herold raised her pet chimpanzee, Travis, like a member of the family in her Stamford, Connecticut home. The widow took baths, drank wine, and shared a bed with her primate pal. Travis even brushed Sandra's hair and kissed her when she left the house. As strange as their closeness was, it seemed harmless enough. After all, Travis had no record of unruly behavior except for one incident in 2003 when he escaped and held up traffic for hours. But nobody expected the tragedy that unfolded when Sandra's friend, 55-year-old Charla Nash, visited one day in 2009 and unintentionally somehow provoked the 14-year-old 200-pound or 91-kilo chimpanzee to fly into a rage. The unprovoked attack was gruesome. Travis latched onto Charla's face, ripping it apart. Sandra felt she had no other choice than to repeatedly stab her beloved animal companion in an attempt to save her friend. An ambulance was summoned to the scene and Charla was taken to the hospital in extremely critical condition. Travis attacked a police officer who shot the chimpanzee dead. Investigators were unsure what set Travis off, but as journalist Brian Walsh pointed out in a Time article, keeping a primate as a household pet is a ticking time bomb. Just like any other undomesticated species, chimpanzees are prone to act on instinct, even after years of living alongside humans without incident, and they are an estimated 5 to 7 times stronger than the average person. Simply put, this tragedy is a sobering reminder of why wild animals should always be considered dangerous and should only be handled by qualified professionals. 6. Baby attacking ferrets. One day during the 2015 holiday season, Jessica Benales of Darby Borough, Pennsylvania, left her 1-month-old daughter, Sky, in a car seat on the floor of their home and ran upstairs to use the bathroom. In the short time she was gone, 2 of the family's 3 pet ferrets escaped their enclosure and attacked the baby girl, ripping off 25% of her face. Sky's father, Bernie Frame, awoke to the sound of his daughter screaming. He and Jessica rushed downstairs to find Sky with severe injuries to her lips, nose, and other parts of her face. The baby was rushed to the hospital where she received life-saving surgery but would need many more reconstructive procedures in coming years. The ferrets were euthanized, but authorities largely blamed Sky's parents, who had 5 young children in their care at the time, claiming that the couple's home was deplorable and infested with insects. They charged the pair with child endangerment and barred them from having contact with their kids as the case worked its way through court. Benali's and Frame maintained that they were good parents who had simply made a mistake, despite being under the supervision of 3 social services agencies and 7 caseworkers when the mauling occurred. How do you feel about this situation? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. 5. Red deer seeks revenge. In 2010, deputies from the Harrison County Sheriff's Department in East Texas responded to an unusual call when a panicked resident summoned help for a 67-year-old member of their household whose pet deer had charged and trampled him. Officers found the man, Gerald Rushton, dead inside a pen where he illegally kept an exotic red stag deer. Rushton had entered the enclosure to feed the animal when the animal became aggressive and pinned its owner against a fence, then pierced him with its antlers, knocked him to the ground, and stomped on him. Game wardens shot the 500-pound, 227-kilo stag before even going into the cage. They said they did not know why Rushton had kept a deer in a kennel on his property, but it wasn't his first brush-in with the law over his keeping of exotic and wild pets. In 1994, Rushton was arrested for unlawfully keeping white-tailed deer in his yard. For whatever reason, he apparently couldn't resist the urge to risk his record and his life by doing it again. Although this was the first attack of its kind in the area, authorities used the tragedy as an opportunity to remind people of the dangers of trying to domesticate a wild animal. 4. Bear turns on owner. Bears are adorable, but most people understand that it would be unrealistic and life-threatening to try keeping one as a pet. Even professional handlers are taking a chance by going near one, as the community of Ross Township, Pennsylvania learned in 2009 when a local resident with years of experience working with wildlife was mauled to death by a pet black bear. Kellyanne Walls had raised the 9-year-old 350-pound, 159-kilo bear named Teddy since cubhood and was cleaning his cage one day in 2009, as she had many times before. She threw a handful of dog food to the other side of Teddy's enclosure to distract him, but for unknown reasons, the bear turned on her and attacked her while her 2 young children helplessly looked on. Kelly's neighbor, Scott Castone, rushed over with his gun and opened fire on the bear, who was on top of the woman, while his kids dialed 911. But by the time help arrived, it was too late to save Kelly's life. While Kelly and her husband were keeping the bear and other animals with a recently expired permit, they had a long-standing history of legitimate wildlife ownership and no previous issues with their pets becoming violent. Their property also had a track record of passing routine state inspections. It just goes to show that even when someone does things by the book and has the proper credentials, there's no way to truly eliminate the unpredictable element of a wild animal's behavior. Pennsylvania Game Commission employee Tim Conway told the press that Kelly made a fatal mistake by not keeping Teddy in a 2-section cage that would enable her to isolate him while she cleaned it, a potentially life-saving measure that is customary among wild animal owners. 3. Suffocating snake. When an Irwin, Pennsylvania family's 10-foot-long or 3-meter, 70-pound, 32-kilo pet boa constrictor named Mo escaped his cage back in 2001, 8-year-old Amber Mountain decided to try playing with the reptile. Soon enough, the little girl was on the kitchen floor with the snake coiled around her neck. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition and died 2 days later. An autopsy unsurprisingly revealed that Amber succumbed to compression of the neck and chest. Amber's parents were accused of leaving her alone in a house full of dangerous snakes, including 4 pythons and the boa constrictor that killed her. Police charged the couple with manslaughter under the suspicion that recklessness and negligence caused their daughter's death. The girl's father, Robert Mountain, alleged that her mother, his estranged wife Marcy, had been out all night with her new boyfriend and still hadn't returned when he went to work the next day. Marcy, who pleaded guilty to child endangerment and received 2 years probation in exchange for testifying against Robert, claimed that he knew Mo's homemade cage was faulty and didn't do enough to prevent the boa constrictor from being able to escape. In fact, she had allegedly been telling her husband for quite some time that he needed to make the cage more secure. Mo had reportedly escaped numerous times, including hours before Robert left for work, so he taped it shut and put a board over it. In the end, the contentious couple's back-and-forth mudslinging did not put either of them in a better position than the other. Robert was found not guilty of manslaughter and walked away from the case with the same child endangerment conviction as Marcy. 2. Mountain lion mauling. When animal control officers visited an Odessa, Texas home in mid-2011, they told the owner of a pet mountain lion that they needed to get a larger cage for the animal and that its current enclosure had unsafely large gaps in it. The woman failed to heed the authorities' instructions, and months later, when a 4-year-old family member approached the cage, the big cat reached its paws through an opening and mauled him. A neighbor overheard the commotion and called 911, and the little boy was hospitalized with lacerations and puncture wounds, including a bite mark to his face. Sadly, he died from his injuries. The Ector County Sheriff's Office initially told the press that the agency would defer to law enforcement in Odessa to press charges, but the incident happened outside the city's jurisdiction, and animal control officers lacked the authority to do anything more than cite the mountain lion's owner, which they did, for failure to show proof of vaccinations. Sheriff Mark Donaldson later said that the department had not ruled out pursuing charges, but that an ongoing investigation had not yet found cause for an arrest. The legality of owning a mountain lion in Texas also became a source of confusion. It was ultimately determined that owners must register their animal and follow strict rules, and that the animal was unregistered. What ultimately became of the case is a mystery. 1. Tiger turns on the hand that feeds. Cynthia Lee Gamble had extensive experience handling exotic animals and was involved in wildlife-related filmmaking. Equipped with an exhibitor's license from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, she ran a for-profit breeding facility called the Center for Endangered Cats on her Pine County, Minnesota property for years with no reported incidents requiring police involvement. The Big Cat veteran's immaculate safety record changed in the worst imaginable way in April 2006. A friend went to visit Cynthia and found her dead inside an enclosure surrounding her tiger's individual cages. A drop door that normally kept the handler separate from the big cats had somehow been left open, enabling a 500-pound or 227-kilo Bengal tiger to escape. Cynthia was mauled to death in the first ever known incident of a tiger killing a human in the state of Minnesota. In the tragedy's aftermath, it came to light that she may not have been as safe about keeping animals as her reputation depicted. Neighbors had protested her plans to open the Center for Endangered Cats in 1997, citing lowered property values and the endangerment of human lives. They accused Cynthia of keeping the cats in unsafe conditions and claimed that a tiger had bitten her colleague, causing injuries that required hospitalization despite the absence of such incidents on her track record. The complaint also alleged that tigers had escaped their enclosures at the site. But Cynthia's colleagues and friends maintained that she operated her business carefully and that her death was nothing more than an unfortunate and unlikely tragedy. Minnesota has some of the nation's most lax exotic animal laws and the established history of maulings that one could expect to come with such laid-back policies.
Number 10. Kiwa hirsuta. Hirsuta means hairy, and that's exactly what this creature is. Discovered on a hydrothermal vent in the South Pacific Ocean in 2006, Kiwa hirsuta is a hairy, blonde, 6-inch or 15-centimetre long crustacean that scientists classified not only as a new species, but a new family entirely, known as Kiwidae. It was first spotted about 5,000 feet or over 1,500 metres below the water's surface during a research expedition on the Easter Plate. located to the west of Easter Island in South America. In the more than 30 years of hydrothermal vent exploration that had taken place by then, nobody had ever seen such a creature. Nicknamed the Yeti crab, Kiwa hirsuta is related to lobsters, shrimp and other crabs, but has distinctive features of its own, including reduced eyes that almost entirely lack pigment, making it blind, because after all, who needs to see on the pitch-dark seafloor? And silky hair-like structures called setae, which preclude it from being classified into the same family as its relatives. The creature seems to be common around hydrothermal vents, not that you or I are likely to be around any in the near future. Researchers still have a lot to learn about the species, but they know it feeds on mussels and is probably omnivorous, like most other crustaceans. Number 9. Anglerfish. Deep-sea anglerfish are represented by a hugely diverse family containing 170 species and counting among 12 groups. They live all over the world but are rarely seen due to their elusive nature and because many are deep dwellers who live anywhere from 1,000 to 16,500 feet. That's between 300 and 5,000 metres below the water's surface. Anglerfish are named after the glowing lure protruding from their head, which they use for attracting the crustaceans they feed on. But with nicknames like snaggletooth sea devil, wolf trap and tyrannical toad, one can imagine that some anglerfish species are less than appealing to the eye. In fact, National Geographic once described them as quite possibly the ugliest animal on the planet. While their sizes and appearances vary, these ambush predators look terrifying with large heads and crescent-shaped mouths filled with long, sharp teeth that are angled inwards for effectively seizing prey. They hunt by lurking along in the pitch-dark seabed and baiting their next meal with their luminescent, fishing rod-like appendage. Once the unfortunate target is close enough, it swiftly gets sucked up and devoured. Because of their hunting style, anglerfish tend to be slow swimmers. Food is scarce at the bottom of the ocean, so they don't eat often, which is why their stomach can expand to twice its size and why their mouths are disproportionately large. It lets them ingest large prey that will hold them over until their next meal comes along. As terrifying as they look, most anglerfish are 6 inches or 16 centimetres long on average, although some species can grow up to 40 inches, over a metre in length. The creatures often display extreme sexual dimorphism, with females being up to 10 times bigger than the males, and their reproductive method is even stranger than their size difference. Males only exist to reproduce and are parasitic. When they find a mate, they latch onto the female and release an enzyme that fuses their skin to hers. Everything but the male's reproductive organs become non-functional, and females are known to take multiple mates. It's not very romantic, but who are we to judge love? Number 8. The tree-psyllid worm. In 2006, researchers working near Australia's Darwin coast discovered a tree-like marine worm living on the sea bottom among sponges. Dubbed Ramesillus multicordata, or the tree-psyllid worm, the creature was only recently studied. It's a strange one for sure. A newly published study describing the creature reveals that it has one head and hundreds of anuses, which are the product of its body and organs dividing. A single specimen can develop as many as 1,000 branches, according to study co-author Dr. Maite Aguado, who explained that unlike other sea worms, the species does not have a singular, tube-like or cylindrical body with an anterior and posterior end, but instead it has one head and multiple posterior branches. The tree-psyllid worm's head remains safely planted within sea sponges, while the rest of its body is spread out through its external pores. That would spell disaster for an animal with an exposed head, particularly when it comes to escaping predators. But this species is adapted to living inside sponges, where it receives protection. Thanks to its many branches, the tree-psyllid worm reproduces rapidly and in large numbers, producing gametes that develop swimming paddles and eyes and swim off to find opposite-sex mates. Researchers have a lot left to learn about the recently identified species, including why there was no trace of food inside its intestines despite their apparent ability to be functional. In addition to not knowing how the animal feeds, researchers are unsure how its branches affect blood circulation and nerve impulses. Number 7. Blobfish. The blobfish, or by its harder and more scientific name, Psychrolutis marcitus, made international headlines in 2013 when it was declared the world's ugliest animal by the Ugly Animal Preservation Society, which held the contest to raise awareness about endangered creatures that receive less conservation support than those that are widely known for being cute or beautiful. Found off the Australian coast at depths of 2,000 to 4,000 feet, or about 600 to 1200 metres, where the water pressure is up to 120 times higher than it is at the surface. The blobfish lacks muscle and a skeleton because the water supports its shape. In its natural habitat, the blobfish looks rather normal, but not when it's brought to the surface, as the world learned the year it won the Ugliest Animal Award. The species is best known by a misshapen specimen nicknamed Mr. Blobby, who was caught in 2003 off the New Zealand coast during a research voyage and took on the appearance of a gelatinous blob with a frown on its face as it lost its form amid the decreased surrounding pressure. Scientists don't know much about the famously hideous creatures, which swim along the ocean floor eating mollusks and crabs that pass by. Their reproductive habits, lifespan, range and numbers are all mysterious, and some experts fear that blobfish are at risk of extinction due to threats posed by human activity. Number 6. Squidworm. No, it's not a character from SpongeBob SquarePants. This creature is known as the squidworm, and it was first found in 2007 in the Coral Triangle area between Indonesia and the Philippines. Marine scientist Karen Osborne from the Scripps Institute of Oceanography is credited with making the incredible find during an expedition using remote-controlled submarines. While it resembles a half-squid, half-worm hybrid, hence its nickname, it's a true worm, belonging to the group that includes leeches and earthworms. The squidworm has 10 tentacles on its head, which are longer than its 4-inch or 10-centimetre long body, according to the Smithsonian Ocean. It breathes and feels its surroundings using 8 of these elastic extendable appendages, and uses the 2 longest ones to eat by passively catching particles that fall through the water. The creature also has 2 feathery structures called nuchal organs, which detect chemicals in the water, acting like a nose. As suspected filter feeders, squidworms are not strong swimmers because they don't need to be. Living just above the ocean floor in one of the richest, most mysterious marine habitats, these deep dwellers prefer to spend their lives at a leisurely pace, often even managing to evade detection by sophisticated scientific equipment. Discoveries like this remind us of how much there still is to learn about the Earth's barely explored oceans, which are now becoming more accessible to us thanks to modern technology. Number 5. New slickhead species. While anchored off central Japan in 2016, biologist Yoshihiro Fujiwara and his crew reeled in a gigantic prehistoric fish that nobody had ever seen before, including the international colleagues they consulted throughout the process of determining whether it was a newly discovered species. In the meantime, 3 more of the purplish creatures were caught over the next year. Scientists placed it in the Aleppocephalid family of fish, more commonly known as slickheads for their scale-free heads. There are over 100 species of these deep dwellers found throughout the world, but the newly discovered species, the Yokozuna slickhead, differs from its relatives in a major way. While most slickheads caught measure just 14 inches or 35 centimetres on average, the Yokozuna slickhead caught by Fujiwara's crew was essentially the size of a small child, measuring 55 inches or 1.5 metres long and tipping the scales at over 55 pounds or 25 kilos. Equipped with multiple rows of sharp teeth, this large species is nothing short of terrifying. It's clear, based on the specimen's stomach contents, that it hunts other fish and may also scavenge instead of feeding on plankton and jellyfish like most other slickheads. The Yokozuna slickhead is also unique because, unlike its relatives, it's a strong swimmer and may be able to cover long distances. In fact, researchers concluded that it's an apex predator, which is a rare discovery in any habitat. Hundreds of new fish species are identified every year, reminding us of just how little we've seen of our planet's vast oceans. Number 4. Unidentified shapeshifter. A viral video of a mysterious dark creature that seems to voluntarily transform its entire shape has resurfaced after first appearing online in 2013. Originally posted on YouTube, the footage is being cited as being sourced from a remotely operated vehicle, or ROV, off Africa's east coast in the Indian Ocean. Reportedly captured 3,753 feet, over 1,100 metres below the water's surface. The clip shows the animal shrinking into a ball, then reshaping itself into something like a rounded cone. Whatever it was, it met an unfortunate end when the vehicle's output thrusters blew it apart. Naturally, one might wonder if the video is fake, but the footage was not altered in any way. Nobody has been able to definitively conclude what the creature is, with the seemingly most credible guesses suggesting it's from the Ctenophora phylum of invertebrates that live throughout the world's oceans. Like the animal in the clip, ctenophores emit a dazzling light show of luminescent colours, which is produced from light reflecting off its cilia. But for now, your guess is as good as anyone else's when it comes to identifying the bizarre deep-sea dweller. Number 3. Batfish. Hailing from the Oncocephalidae family, there are over 60 batfish species worldwide, most of which dwell in warm and temperate seas. As their nickname implies, they have broad, flat heads and small bodies covered in spines. Batfish are poor swimmers who plod along on the ocean floor with their thick, limb-like fins, and while most are deep dwellers, some are found in shallow waters. As a type of anglerfish, most of these creatures have a fishing rod-like appendage on top of their head, which they use for luring prey. Unlike other anglerfish, the batfish can retract the lure when it's not in use. Some species lack the appendage entirely, including the short-nosed batfish. The red-lipped batfish, also called the Galapagos batfish, is one of the most recognisable species. Simply put, it looks like it's wearing red lipstick. It's rarely seen, despite living in relatively shallow waters, between 10 and 250 feet or between 3 and 75 metres deep. But if you happen to get lucky enough to catch a glimpse of one, you'll know it when you see it. Number 2. Blue dragons. A grandmother in South Africa encountered a surprise late last year when she discovered around 20 bizarre bright blue dragon-like creatures washed up and squirming around Fishhawk Bay near Cape Town. It turns out that the specimens are rare sea slugs of the Glaucus atlanticus species. Nicknamed blue dragons for obvious reasons, they resemble what Natalie O'Neill described in a New York Post article as a lizard-octopus-bird hybrid. Dubbed the most beautiful killer in the ocean, these peculiar animals feed on the Portuguese man-of-war and other venomous creatures, and in the process they store concentrated doses of their prey's stinging cells in their own bodies. This results in the blue dragon having an even more potent sting than any of its prey themselves. Do not ever touch one of these. Maria Wagner, the woman who found the beached blue dragons, wisely refrained from touching the toxic sea slug since she didn't know what they were. Would you know what to do if a mysterious unknown fish washed up on a beach near you? Tell me what you'd do. Be honest. Leave a comment down below. And remember to subscribe to Epic Wildlife if you haven't done so already. Number 1. Feisty Elvis worms. Most people normally think of worms as gross, but 4 new marine worm species identified last year by an international team of researchers are surprisingly pleasing to look at. Covered in iridescent, colourful scales and bristles that produce a glittery effect, these creatures are nicknamed Feisty Elvis worms for their dazzling displays, which are reminiscent of the singer's flashy sequined stage outfits. Found scattered throughout various parts of the Pacific Ocean, including off California, Spain, Mexico and Costa Rica. The newly described species belong to the Panalia polyno genus of scale worms, and in case you're wondering, their vibrant, sparkling appearance isn't for show. They all live deep in the ocean, with some being found near hydrothermal vents where it's too dark to show their colours off. Scientists don't know why Elvis worms have such colourful scales. While all 4 species have 9 sets of scales, each has distinctive features that set it apart from the others. For example, P. elvisi is gold and pink, while P. orphanae has bluish scales that sparkle in rainbow colours. Like many marine animals, whale carcasses that sink to the seafloor appear to be a major food source for Elvis worms. There's a lot scientists don't know yet about these magnificent eye-catching life forms, which will hopefully come to light through future research. Number 10. Real-life basilisk. There was once a horrifying sea monster skulking through the world's oceans, like a real-life basilisk. Its name is Pleurodon serpentis, and it was the type of mosasaur that scientists agree hunted like a giant snake. The fossils of this ancient monster have been found primarily in Morocco. There have been at least 40 species of mosasaur found to date, making them some of the most prolific underwater hunters in the dinosaur world. They became dominant predators after the mass extinction during the middle of the Cretaceous period, and then began changing and evolving into many different species over the next 25 million years. Of course, that was until a large rock fell out of the sky 66 million years ago and ruined everything. According to Nick Longrek, a paleontologist who's obsessed with mosasaurs, these creatures were just beginning to hit their stride when they were wiped off the face of the earth. But how did these real-world basilisks hunt? They stalked their prey through the darkness of the ocean, with some of them evolving flippers, others having tails, and almost all of them slithering around like giant snakes. Some could grow to at least 27 feet, over 8 metres long. They had teeth like razors for killing fish and giant squid. The only difference between the mosasaur and the deadly basilisk from Harry Potter is that the mosasaur wasn't toxic. Number 9. Alaskan dragon. In Alaska, tourists filmed what can only be described as a horrifying dragon. The video footage clearly showed some kind of monster swimming underwater near a collapsed glacier with 7 sharp black fins poking out from the surface. It looked as though the strange dragon was covered in dinosaur-like spikes. It surfaced just enough for the shape of it to be seen in the video clip before vanishing underwater and not resurfacing. So far, nobody can explain what the tourists saw. It appeared to be massive, maybe upwards of 20 feet or 6 metres in length. Some have speculated that the creature woke up when the nearby glacier began to crash into the ocean. It could be that it was slumbering deep in a hidden lair under the ice and was woken up by all the commotion. Of course, there are some who claim the video to be fake, but that honestly doesn't seem to be the case this time. And while it might not be an ancient sea dragon in the end, there's no doubt that it is some kind of freakish creature nobody has been able to identify. And to make matters even more mysterious, this was not the first time that an unidentified creature has been filmed swimming around in Antarctic waters. Number 8. Kraken Lair. New evidence has shed some light on an ancient monster so scary that if it was real today, nobody would dare enter the water. I'm talking about a literal kraken, which is so huge and terrifying that it would make any modern sea creature look like a shrimp. Back during the Triassic period, there was a sea monster known as the ichthyosaur. It was larger than multiple school buses and was at the top of the food chain. Picture the Loch Ness Monster on steroids. However, Mark McMenamin from the Mount Holyoke College recently investigated the fossilised remains of an ichthyosaur and concluded that there was likely an even larger, more dangerous and far more fearsome sea beast prowling the waters at the same time. Evidence of this monster came from the Berlin Ichthyosaur State Park in Nevada. Mark found the remains of 9 ichthyosaurs, each of them measuring around 45 feet or 13 metres long. But he also found that the place where all the bones were piled up was once part of an environment deep underwater. The way the carcasses were arranged suggests that Nevada, or at least this park in Nevada, was once the lair of a huge and impossibly megalithic creature that was feasting on what until now researchers has thought was the biggest and meanest sea monster of the day. The new unnamed sea monster has never been discovered. Its bones have never been found. But of course, that doesn't mean it didn't exist. Judging by the way the ichthyosaur bones were arranged, the behaviour suggests an octopus so large that we can't even fathom it. The way in which the bones of the dead ichthyosaurs were broken indicate that whatever octopus-like creature killed them was so big it could literally snap their necks like twigs. Number 7. Frog-faced turtles. Millions of years ago, our planet had some very strange turtles. They're called quick-mouthed frog turtles, and although they weren't as terrifying as an octopus that was potentially more than 50 feet or 15 metres long, they were still pretty tough creatures for their day. The remains of these fearsome turtles were discovered by paleontologists in Madagascar. They date back to the Cretaceous period, about 100 million years ago. The turtles had faces like frogs and feasted on unsuspecting prey by slurping up mouthfuls of water and then swallowing whatever poor animals got caught in their hungry maws. What's truly fascinating about this turtle monster is that it was endemic to Madagascar. Even 100 million years ago, Madagascar was still an isolated region of the world with its very own fascinating animals. Researchers only found the remains of this turtle because they were looking for dinosaur and crocodile fossils. According to Walter Joyce, a paleontologist involved with the dig, the specimen they found is one of the best preserved turtles from the late Cretaceous. However, they don't know when the turtle evolved, how it evolved, or why it even went extinct. They believe it probably survived the extinction event that wiped out the dinosaurs, so something else must have taken these guys out. But what? What do you think made the frog-faced turtles go extinct? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 6. Dinosaur fish. In 2021, a dinosaur was found swimming off the coast of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean. It was found by shark hunters using gill nets to try and rip sharks out from the deep waters. Instead of sharks, they turned up a living fossil previously thought to be extinct. The fish they pulled up was a monstrous coelacanth, a real-life sea monster that has been around for over 420 million years. These fish are incredibly strange. They have 8 fins in total, 4 of which act like limbs and almost look like fish-styled arms and legs. As you might already know, coelacanths were presumed extinct until one was discovered in 1938. But since then, not very many more have been found, making this an exceptionally rare discovery. The coelacanth is one of the biggest bony fish on the planet and can weigh over 200 pounds or 90 kilos, while reaching lengths of up to 7 feet or 2.1 metres. According to a new study published in the South African Journal of Science, Gillnet fishing could very well be impacting how many of these legendary fish are left. This is because gillnets basically scoop up everything in their path as they are dragged through the deep ocean at depths of up to 1,600 feet or 500 metres. It is now believed that Madagascar is the only place left on Earth where coelacanths gather in mass. And even though we normally have a predisposition to killing monsters that we find, there are some groups striving to save the coelacanth. I mean, after all, it has been alive on our planet since before the dinosaurs were even around. Number 5. Killer babies. Some of the first sea monsters to appear on our planet did so 500 million years ago. These were some of the earliest predators in the ocean, and some of the largest animals living at the time. The sea monsters I'm talking about belong to a rather creepy group of animals known as Arthropoda. Today, this group consists of spiders and crustaceans such as crabs and lobsters. But between 500 million years ago and now, a lot has changed. A new fossil study led by expert archaeologists from the Northwest University of Xi'an in China has proved that not only were fully developed Arthropoda adults proficient killers, so too were the tiny babies that came out of them. These are the oldest and arguably the most primitive arthropods that ever lived, belonging to a group known as the Radiodonta. They were armed with strange, grasping appendages sticking out from the top of their head, as well as a mouth like a disc with savage, toothy serrations used for grinding up prey. At the time they were alive, they would have been giant apex predators reaching outstanding lengths of over 3 feet or almost a metre long. Keep in mind this was during the early Cambrian era, when things weren't quite so large as they were later on. Back to the new fossil study. Archaeologists found that juveniles were only 0.7 inches long at birth. However, they were born pretty much already developed with a circular mouth full of horrifying teeth and spiky tentacle-like appendages with thorns that they could immediately use to begin feasting on other creatures. Number 4. Beautiful Killer. A small and not so terrifying sea monster depicted as being the most beautiful killer in the ocean was recently discovered washed up on a beach in Africa. At first glance, it doesn't look like much. The killer animal really just looks like a gelatinous, dazzling blue dragon, no larger than a shrimp. And yet this seemingly innocent creature can kill with a single touch. The monster is known scientifically as Glaucus atlanticus. It's actually a type of sea slug known to feed on other deadly marine animals, such as the Portuguese man-o'-war. When it eats other venomous critters, the blue dragon absorbs their toxic cells and then stores them inside its own body, allowing it to deliver a sting that is even more venomous than what it eats. If you were to touch the Glaucus atlanticus, even with just one finger, you could immediately begin suffering from nausea, severe pain, uncontrollable vomiting, and even death. As for the woman who found the creature washed up on the beach, she was extremely lucky. Instinct told her not to touch, and this ended up saving her life. But not everyone ends up so lucky. Because they are so small, only about an inch long, they can be difficult to spot on white sand. Someone who mistakes the creature for a starfish and picks it up could end up taking a one-way trip to the hospital. Number 3. The black swallower. The black swallower is one of the ugliest fish in the ocean. It also has a very peculiar way of eating. At less than 4 inches or 10 centimetres in length, it has the uncanny ability to gobble up fish bigger than itself. It's known for eating fish over 2 times its length and up to 10 times its own body mass. The black swallower has been compared to the boa constrictor because it swallows its prey whole and doesn't leave any leftovers. It would be as if you opened your mouth and swallowed a person 12 feet or 3.5 metres tall in a single bite. Believe it or not, the black swallower is actually quite common in North America. The only thing is that they live at 10,000 feet or 3,000 metres beneath the surface of the water. Down at these extreme depths, it really is an eat or be eaten kind of world. The black swallower has no scales, it has an unusually long head, and the strangest thing about it is that it has a stomach far larger than any normal fish, which it uses when eating prey much larger than itself. It also has sharp rows of teeth to grab hold of prey. Once the prey is trapped, it moves its jaw up and down until the animal is in its stomach. Number 2. Sea monster vs. seal. One of the deadliest animals in the ocean is an ordinary humpback whale. These creatures are magnificent. They dive deep into the ocean and they can grow over 60 feet or 18 metres in length. The size alone makes it a devastating animal. They weigh over 4 tonnes or 3,500 kilos and can be wildly unpredictable. Recent footage popped up online showing a monstrous humpback whale coming up underneath a defenceless seal off the coast of Mexico. In the footage, the seal can be seen swimming casually along the surface of some calm blue water. Then a humpback whale comes out of nowhere, rears out of the water so that the seal gets caught on its back, and the seal is forced to surf on the back of the whale for dear life before the monster submerges again, leaving the seal confused by what in the world just happened. Truth be told, the huge whale probably didn't even know the seal was there. That's how big and intimidating these things are. Number 1. Viper dogfish shark. Off the coast of Taiwan, scientists recently captured some of the most horrendous fish anywhere in the ocean. Scientists pulled a small group of viper dogfish sharks out of the water during a survey. What they saw was nothing short of terrifying. These sharks are very strange to look at. They have glowing bellies, eyes like glass, and teeth like needles sticking out of their protruding jaw. The shark isn't that big, but it literally glows and has jagged teeth like an ocean wolf. It lives very close to the bottom of the ocean and feeds primarily on crustaceans. There have been almost no sightings of this scary species, which makes the 4 hauled up off the coast of Taiwan quite special. While there may not be very many of them left in the ocean, nobody actually knows how many there are. So they aren't classified as endangered. Instead, they are listed as data deficient. Even though we don't know much about these sharks, they have been compared to goblin sharks because of how menacing they are. Some of the scientists believe they're closely related to ninja sharks, which are also known for glowing. Number 10. A cosmic relic. In 2020, a team of researchers in the Sahara have discovered what may be the rarest meteorite to ever land on our planet. The stunning piece of space rock is ancient, even when compared to our own solar system. Researchers weren't even looking for the meteorite when they found it. Nonetheless, they were quite shocked to unearth it. They took it back to the lab and found out that it dates back not a few thousand years, or even a few million years. Instead, the cosmic relic is approximately 4.56 billion years old. If this number doesn't quite sound right, that's because our planet is only 4.54 billion years old. That makes it older than the Earth. It's the most ancient space rock anyone has ever found. Scientists named the rock Erdcheng 002 or EC002 because they love catchy names. It was found in the Algeria region of the Sahara, and it's been described by the Lunar and Planetary Institute as being coarse-grained, beige, a little yellow, a little green, and covered in crystals. Based on the texture of the meteorite, it was probably formed from magma. This is quite different from most meteorites that are made of basalt. But you're probably wondering how a rock landed on Earth that is even older than Earth. From what scientists can gather, the meteorite probably came from a protoplanet, which is a large piece of rock yet to develop into a legitimate planet. It most likely formed when the solar system was only 2 million years old. The protoplanet was then probably destroyed violently by another, even larger piece of rock like Saturn or Jupiter, and this meteorite has been floating around ever since until it landed in the Sahara. Number 9. A green past. Sabujadi is an archaeological site in the Nubian Desert, which is a part of the larger Sahara Desert, located between the Red Sea and the Nile. The dig site covers a large area and has a human history going back 10,000 years. Archaeologists have found over 1,500 rock drawings in the region, but have never determined when people first lived in the area, or even what life was like for these ancient people. However, scientists do know it wasn't always an inhospitable desert. There is actually proof of this in the ancient cave paintings, which show drawings of crocodiles, primitive boats, hippopotamuses, and a landscape very different to what the Sahara is now. Not only did the Sahara used to be a green paradise, but so too did most of northern Africa. Dr. Bruce Williams has been working in Sudan in the desert for over 50 years, and he said that the area was once populated by people who herded cattle at a time when seasonal monsoons delivered so much rainfall that there were green and fertile plains rather than dust and death. Of course, the Sahara is at least 3 million years old, but seasonal monsoons kept it livable back then. The Nile was a great and surging river. The indigenous people had plenty to eat, and the whole place would have looked more like the savannas in Kenya and Tanzania today. The Sahara was populated by herds of gazelle, elephants, and even giraffes. So what happened? It's actually pretty simple. The climate changed. The monsoons stopped coming, the water stopped falling, the plants died, the animals left, and the humans went away. Number 8. Ancient stone tools. Archaeologists have discovered hundreds of stone tools hidden in the Sahara that were once used by our ancient ancestors Homo erectus. Archaeologists found the tools inside of a gold mine, but of course the ancient people would have lived inside the mine far before modern humans ever got to it and began extracting the gold. They would have lived there 700,000 years ago. The mine is located in the eastern region of the Sahara, far out in the middle of the desert, away from any habitable land. Studies have suggested that Homo erectus, which means upright man, came into existence about 2 million years ago and was the first species with the bodily proportions of a modern human. They were also the first species of human to have a flat face, a pointy nose, and less hair covering their bodies. These ancient people lived in the Sahara Desert back when it was a green paradise like we mentioned in the listing before. But the evidence of their lives is still hidden under thousands of square miles of shifting sands, with most, if not all of their ancient cave settlements having already been reduced to dust thanks to the changing climate. As for the tools, archaeologists discovered a cleaver and other instruments made out of rock, leading them to believe the mine may have been an extremely primitive manufacturing site from which a group of early people crafted tools, perhaps for the whole region. Number 7. Deadly dinosaurs. Long before Homo erectus ever stood on 2 legs, dinosaurs roamed the Sahara. According to a team of international researchers, the Sahara was in fact the deadliest place on our planet 100 million years ago. This was during a time when ferocious predators roamed free, killing indiscriminately. These predators included flying reptiles, crocodiles with legs, saber-toothed cat-like creatures over 24 feet or 7 meters long, with serrated teeth, and huge raptors that may have hunted in packs and ripped other dinosaurs limb from limb. But how did scientists discover that the Sahara had been such a dangerous place? It's all thanks to fossils from the Cretaceous period found in Morocco, known today as the Kemkem group. Fossils indicate that 3 of the biggest predatory dinosaurs of the Cretaceous lived in this exact spot, making the wilderness of the old Earth's Sahara a never-ending battle zone. According to Dr. Nizar Ibrahim with the University of Detroit Mercy, a human time traveller wouldn't last very long in this area, considering it was arguably the most unsafe location at any point in the history of the planet. But just wait, you may even recognise some of the monsters that lived here. The waterways would have been filled with coelacanths and lungfish, though the coelacanth would have been at least 5 times larger than the ones found recently. There would also have been sharks with teeth like daggers and even more terrifying nightmare monsters. Have you ever thought about what the world was like 100 million years ago? Did you think it was like this? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. Number 6. Ancient Christian monks. At one point in time, monks used to live in the Sahara Desert, and now their secrets are being revealed. A Christian site dating back to the 5th century AD was recently found being eaten away by the desert sands. It was found in Egypt by a French and Norwegian archaeological team who have since been investigating the mysterious lives lived by monks far away from the rest of civilization. Researchers found 19 buildings, a church and biblical passages along with religious inscriptions. Even in the nowhere of the Sahara, Christianity found a foothold over 1500 years ago. Biblical passages were scrawled on the walls in Greek, there was Coptic graffiti found, and it's believed that the small community of monks operated in relative harmony until the 8th century. They also may have farmed animals and produced wine, which explains how they survived so long in the middle of nowhere. What this proves in historical terms is that even at the very edges of the Roman Empire, Christianity was thriving only 500 years after the alleged death of Christ. Number 5. The Eye of the Sahara. The Eye of the Sahara is one of the greatest marvels on the planet. In simple terms, the Eye of the Sahara is a unique formation that dates back to Pangaea and was created because of rock movements over a period of 100 million years. The structure, which doesn't look exactly like an eye, it looks a bit more like a bullseye, was likely formed when the supercontinent Pangaea split apart. But you can't see this amazing formation from the ground. For it to be truly appreciated, it has to be seen from the sky. It was first photographed in the 1960s by astronauts and was often used as a point of reference during landing sequences. The original theory was that an asteroid had created a giant pit, seeing as it kind of looks like a crater from outer space. However, scientists have traced the rocks in the eye back to Pangaea. They found evidence that as the land broke apart and the Atlantic Ocean flowed inwards, and at the same time magma bubbled up from beneath the surface, the unique formation was born. To put it in plain English, eruptions and erosions formed various rings of sediment over a long stretch of time, resulting in what today looks like a huge alien eye in the middle of the desert. Number 4. Ancient skeletons. The Sahara Desert may be the location of what scientists say could be the oldest race war in history. A group of skeletons were discovered hidden under the sand of the desert dating back 13,000 years. The skeletons had been massacred around the year 11,000 BC. They were discovered with weapons made of flint, which researchers say were probably used to kill them. The skeletons were found grouped together in the Jebel Sahaba cemetery, one of the earliest organised burial grounds ever used. The discovery came from northern Sudan, and at least 61 corpses have so far been exhumed. Only small clusters of dead bodies have been found throughout the Sahara up until this discovery. This was the first true graveyard. But it's not the graveyard that's so spooky, it's how and why all these people were massacred. Out of the 61 people found buried here, 45% of them had been killed by violence. There were fragments of arrows discovered, pieces of weaponry, and some shards of flint even found still embedded in bones. The bones also showed cut marks suggesting slashing weapons. But what is this about a race war? Scientists believe the fighting probably broke out because of some environmental disaster. The disaster forced small groups of nomadic people to band together for safety. This resulted in overcrowding and anger between the different races, and this probably erupted in a war between the different factions, leaving a large group of them brutalised and buried in the desert. Number 3. Mysterious pterosaurs. There are dragons hidden in the Sahara Desert. At least the closest thing the Earth has ever seen to dragons. Researchers recently found 3 new species of flying reptiles that lived here 100 million years ago. A community of flying reptiles known as pterosaurs were discovered by an international team of scientists from the University of Portsmouth. They were toothed pterosaurs that were part of a river ecosystem rich in prehistoric life. The fossils of the winged monsters have proved that the pterosaurs that lived in the Sahara were very similar to those found in other places throughout the globe. But just exactly what were the pterosaurs? These animals were flying apex predators. They dominated the sky and feasted on all kinds of different creatures. They usually snatched up prey while flying using their spiky teeth. They would have been kind of similar to birds today, like condors and albatrosses, only much larger and significantly more violent. If you think seagulls are annoying, imagine trying to enjoy a day at the beach with a flying reptile the size of a car that could literally snatch you off your blanket and eat you in mid-air. Number 2. Hidden underground structure. A mysterious structure has just been spotted hiding under the sand in the Sahara Desert, and some claim it could be a secret pyramid. This structure is allegedly beneath the sand of the Egyptian part of the Sahara near Saqqara. Based on satellite images, experts believe there could be multiple pyramids hidden out in the middle of nowhere in places nobody has ever thought to look. Unfortunately, this news has not been authenticated by mainstream scientists. Usually when someone discovers something like a pyramid hidden underground by using satellite images, they get dismissed as a crackpot. But there could be some truth to the claim. After all, the desert sands are known for wiping away the most solidly built structures. It's not that far-fetched to believe the Egyptians crafted unknown pyramids farther from Giza, which over the past few thousand years was submerged by sand. Number 1. It's growing. A new study has revealed something shocking about the Sahara. This isn't so much about what's hidden in the Great Desert, but more about what will soon be swallowed by the unstoppable sands of the largest desert on Earth. This study came from scientists at the University of Maryland, funded by the National Science Foundation. They discovered that since 1920, the Sahara has expanded by roughly 10%. That means in just 1 century, the desert has gotten about 10% larger. What this news suggests is that as summer in Africa gets hotter and the rainy seasons get shorter, the desert will continue to spread primarily to the south. But not only the Sahara. Other deserts around the world may also be expanding at similar rates. But what does this mean for the future? It means that in 1,000 years, researchers could be re-excavating the Giza pyramids, or even the city of Cairo after invincible winds of sand bury all of Egypt. Of course, this is an extreme interpretation, though not entirely out of the question. The truth is that climate change, whether brought on by humans or as a part of the natural climate cycle, can cause northern Africa to get drier. The drier it gets, the vaster the desert grows. Number 9. The Ladoacon. What would you do if you found a giant dinosaur skeleton of a shark that made the great white look like a sardine? This here is your specimen. Following the world's worst ever mass extinction, known as the End Permian event, during the Middle Triassic epoch around 245 million years ago, large land-dwelling reptiles began migrating to the sea and adapting to the aquatic life, marking the start of a time period that was rife with large apex marine predators. Included among them was a bust-sized marine reptile, an ichthyosaur, called Thalattoarchon saurophagus. Based on a fossilised specimen discovered in Nevada in 1998 and officially described in 2013, the species was at least 28 feet, almost 9 metres long, according to National Geographic. Unlike most ichthyosaurs who had simple cone-shaped teeth, Thalattoarchon was equipped with double-edged blade-like chompers, with its biggest teeth measuring 4 inches or 10 centimetres long. The creature's large head, which had huge eyes to go along with it, was roughly twice the size in ratio to its body compared to other ichthyosaurs. These characteristics likely made Thalattoarchon an apex predator among ichthyosaurs, with scientists theorising that it was the first ocean carnivore that evolved to feed on prey its own size. Its adaptability also suggests that marine ecosystems bounced back impressively fast after that massive extinction event, at least compared to the creatures on land. Number 8. Giganotosaurus. Do you ever wonder if there were any apex predators bigger than the infamous T-Rex? Here's one for you, the Giganotosaurus. Heard it straight from the man who discovered it. Known only from fragmentary remains, the Giganotosaurus genus consisted of at least one known species, the Giganotosaurus carolini, the largest meat-eating theropod dinosaur of the late Cretaceous period. That's right, it was the king in its own habitat. Discovered in 1993 and first described in a study 2 years later, these colossal creatures roamed modern-day Argentina between 98 and 97 million years ago. Measuring between 40 and 43 feet or between 12 and 13 metres long from head to tail, with its head alone measuring 5.2 feet or 1.6 metres long, Giganotosaurus slightly outranks the Tyrannosaurus rex among the biggest carnivorous dinosaurs. Scientists initially estimated the species' weight at 6.6 to 8.8 tonnes. More recent research suggests the Giganotosaurus was even larger, tipping the scale at up to 15 tonnes. With 2 large, strong legs that it walked upright on and a thin, pointed tail, Giganotosaurus was both strong and agile and was capable of maintaining good balance and making quick turns while running, according to Live Science. In addition to being larger than T-Rex, a 2001 study claims that it could also run faster, clocking in at up to 31 miles or 50 kilometres an hour. Giganotosaurus likely had 2 3-fingered hands equipped with sharp claws. It's fairly safe to say then that Giganotosaurus lacked natural predators and fed on herbivorous dinosaurs. Number 7. Liopleurodon. Consisting of 2 known species, the extinct Liopleurodon genus of marine reptiles included some of the mightiest marine creatures of all time. These apex predators lived in a shallow body of water in what is now France, starting around 165 million years ago during the late Jurassic period. Imagine finding one of these while you're out hunting for snails, or as they say in France, escargot. Like most pliosaurs, Liopleurodons had elongated heads, relatively short necks, thick torsos and long flipper-like limbs. L. ferox, the larger of the Liopleurodon species, likely grew between 16 and 23 feet or 5 to 7 metres long and weighed up to 10 tonnes, although the largest known specimen was probably over 33 feet or 10 metres long. That's right, it would have turned you into a quick snack if you wound up in its waters. An ambush predator, the Liopleurodon was a strong swimmer that was capable of quickly accelerating in pursuit of prey thanks to its 4 large flippers. Its forward-facing nostrils indicate that it had a superior sense of smell that came in handy for finding food. But this sea monster was not infallible despite its advantages, and the Liopleurodon and other plesiosaurs ultimately lost their battle for survival against a newer, more adept and deadlier group of reptiles called the mosasaurs by the start of the Cretaceous period around 150 million years ago. Number 6. Argentinosaurus. Discovered in 1987 on a farm in southwestern Argentina where it lived during the late Cretaceous period, the Argentinosaurus genus of sauropods represent one of the largest known land animals of all time. It hails from the diverse Titanosaur family, which consisted of humongous sauropods that existed on every known continent, and many of which thrived up until dinosaurs went extinct around 66 million years ago. Paleontologists can't seem to agree on exactly how big the creature was, with more generous estimates suggesting that Argentinosaurus was 100 to 130 feet or 30 to 40 metres long and weighed as much as 100 tonnes. Nobody knows for sure how large the dinosaur was because it's only known from fragmentary remains, leaving scientists tasked with making educated guesses based on more complete remains of smaller sauropods. Argentinosaurus grew slowly, taking up to 40 years to reach its maximum size. Based on what experts know about other titanosaurs, it probably laid between 10 and 15 eggs at a time, each measuring up to a foot, 30 centimetres in diameter. Given its size, Argentinosaurus was likely a slow mover, plodding along at a maximum of 5 miles or 8 kilometres an hour. This would have made the species vulnerable to the smaller but faster moving carnivores that it shared its territory with, like Giganotosaurus, which probably couldn't take it down one-on-one, but may have had the strength in numbers. And if they did kill one of these beasts, you can bet that their whole pack ate well for days. Argentinosaurus is just one candidate among several competitors for the title of largest land animal that ever lived, including Bruchithaeosaurus, an extinct sauropod from India, Futalonctosaurus, a herbivorous late Cretaceous titanosaur that lived in modern-day Argentina, and Dreadnoughtus, a supermassive sauropod that made breaking news after its discovery in 2014. Number 5. Basilosaurus. It wasn't just dinosaurs that make normal people cower in fear. Early ancestors of modern whales were also totally terrifying. Found throughout the Tethys Ocean and other ancient water bodies, the extinct Basilosaurus whale genus lived between 41.3 and 33.9 million years ago in the late Eocene epoch. These early marine mammals were members of a primitive group of cetaceans called Archaeoceti and were top predators in their environment. There are 2 known Basilosaurus species. Fossilised evidence of one, known as B. cetoides, was first discovered along the US Gulf Coast, with others being found throughout the eastern US. The other species, B. isis, has appeared in parts of North Africa, including Jordan, Egypt, Morocco and Tunisia, and possibly Antarctica. At up to 60 feet or 18 metres long, with a skull alone measuring as much as 3 feet or 1 metre, Basilosaurus may have been the largest creature of its time period. It had a bite force comparable to that of T-Rex. A study of the ancient whale's stomach contents revealed that it was indeed a formidable and fearsome force in its ecosystem, feasting on sharks and fish up to 20 inches or half a metre long. Bite marks on skull fossils belonging to smaller whales bear evidence that Basilosaurus also preyed upon other cetaceans. Basilosaurus likely went extinct around 34 million years ago during the Eocene-Oligocene extinction event, which was small compared to some of history's other extinctions, but saw the eradication of this and many other marine creatures, including the remaining Archaeoceti species. Number 4. Kronosaurus. These monstrosities inhabited the world's waters between 120 and 100 million years ago during the early Cretaceous period. Although scientists believe that the Kronosaurus may have had a worldwide presence, the fossilised remains of only 2 species have ever been found. The first, K. queenslandicus, was first discovered in northeastern Australia in 1899 and officially described in 1924. The other, K. boyacinus, was discovered in Colombia over 3/4 of a century later in 1977. Obviously, they're rare finds. At up to 36 feet or 9 metres long and weighing between 7 and 10 tonnes, these creatures rank among the largest known plesiosaurs. Bite marks found in the skull of the Australian plesiosaur Uromangosaurus shows that the fast-swimming Kronosaurus preyed on marine reptiles, including fellow plesiosaurs. But it did not fare any better than its relatives, who ultimately succumbed to better adapted, more vicious predators, including mosasaurs and sharks. Scientists believe it's possible for Kronosaurus fossils to turn up in places they haven't been found, including the western US, which was covered in a shallow body of water during the early Cretaceous period, and where other plesiosaurs have been discovered. So if you're out on a hike in Nevada, Utah, or Arizona, you could stumble upon the remnants of the massive sea beast. Number 3. Lacalcon aleocranianus. Earlier this year, scientists in Argentine Patagonia unearthed the well-preserved skull of a new carnivorous dinosaur species that wreaked havoc on the region around 85 million years ago, during the late Cretaceous epoch. Dubbed Lacalcon aleocranianus, it was one of several members of a group of meat-eating dinosaurs that dominated the South American landscape at the time, feasting on weaker prey. Measuring roughly 16 feet or 5 meters long and armed with huge claws and a 20-inch or 50 centimeter skull filled with sharp serrated teeth, L. aleocranianus was formidable in appearance even if it wasn't quite as large as some other carnivorous dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus rex and Giganotosaurus. It was also smaller than Phiovenator exoni, a fellow abelosaurid that was found just 2,300 feet or 700 meters away in March 2018. Much like modern predators who coexist in the same habitat, they probably competed with one another for food and occasionally fought and killed each other. These recent discoveries are not only helpful for understanding how utterly frightening the prehistoric world was, but how diverse and abundant abelosaurids were throughout Patagonia and more locally during what scientists call the dinosaurs' twilight period. How would you try to survive if you were alive during the terrifying world of the dinosaurs? It wouldn't be easy, but would you even try to find a way to avoid getting eaten? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Then remember to subscribe to Epic Wildlife if you haven't already. Number 2. Mosasaurus. The extinct Mosasaurus genus of marine reptiles ruled the waters of modern-day North America and Europe between 82 and 66 million years ago during the late Cretaceous period. Their fossils often appear inland where bodies of water once existed amid higher sea levels, including the Great Interior Sea that covered a large portion of the American Midwest. Scientists believe that mosasaurs evolved from early Cretaceous terrestrial reptiles that resembled modern-day monitor lizards. An amphibious early version of the mosasaur, known as the Dallas lizard, Dallosaurus, and nicknamed the T-Rex of the ocean, had tiny feet and hands that enabled it to move both in water and on land, and which eventually evolved into fin-like limbs better adapted to a marine environment. The largest mosasaur specimens measured up to 60 feet or 18 meters long and weighed as much as 15 tons, although scientists are unsure of its exact size range. Resembling a crocodile with fins, it was a top predator and one of the deadliest marine reptiles of its day. Mosasaurs had a ferocious set of teeth suited for shredding prey like fish, birds, and other marine reptiles. A second set of teeth further inside the creature's mouth stopped prey from escaping during their terrifying final moments before being devoured. These fearsome sea monsters are blamed for eradicating at least 2 other reptile groups, including the ichthyosaurs and the plesiosaurs, by outcompeting them for food. But, much like the marine creatures they wiped out, mosasaurs were not invincible. If they hadn't gone extinct during the Cretaceous-Paleogene event that wiped out the dinosaurs, it's entirely possible that they would have lost out to smarter, faster, and more vicious ancient sharks. Number 1. Titanoboa. Between 60 and 58 million years ago, members of the extinct Titanoboa genus of unimaginably huge snakes lived in what is now northeastern Colombia. These utterly terrifying creatures came to dominate their tropical ecosystem just 6 million years after the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction that wiped out the dinosaurs during the Paleocene epoch. At up to 45 feet or 13 meters long, roughly the length of a school bus, and weighing as much as 2,500 pounds, over 1,100 kilograms, that's the size of a small car, and with the highest part of its body measuring as high as a man's waist, Titanoboa ruled the jungle and ate pretty much anything it wanted, although it fed primarily on fish. The only known Titanoboa species is the largest snake ever discovered. It lived alongside other gargantuan prehistoric creatures, including crocodilians, turtles, and fish that would be considered abnormally huge today, in the now arid Cerrejón region that was once a lush tropical forest. At the time, the climate near the equator was much hotter and wetter than it is today, enabling cold-blooded creatures to grow much larger than they do now. Even today, the largest snakes and other reptiles live in tropical environments, while those further from the equator are smaller in size, according to Florida Museum vertebrate paleontologist Jonathan Bloch, who co-led the 2009 expedition that resulted in Titanoboa's discovery. Scientists are still trying to figure out exactly where the Titanoboa belongs on the evolutionary family tree. Number 10. New Mexican Triceratops. New dinosaur species are always exciting, right? Check this one out. A new dinosaur has been found in Mexico, and it looks an awful lot like a Triceratops. It's actually been identified as a new species of horned dinosaur, what's known as a ceratopsid. It lived about 82 million years ago during the Cretaceous period, making it one of the oldest horned dinosaurs in the world. But it wasn't very big. The creature only grew to be a maximum of about 15 feet or 4.5 meters in length, though of course it was still significantly larger than most land animals today. If it were around now, it would terrify you if you encountered it. One thing that makes this new dinosaur, named Menephinoceratops coelii, so unique from others is that it had a distinct bone that formed a huge frill above its head, called a squamosal. It was less ornate than the frills on the other ceratopsids, but it was more concave, which is something scientists haven't seen much of before. This amazing dinosaur lived throughout North America, and like all its fellow dinosaurs, was wiped out with the Great Meteorite 66 million years before today. Number 9. Ancient Trilobite. Researchers have discovered the fossil of a trilobite from 429 million years ago. And while trilobites themselves are nothing new, this fossil was something different. Scientists were able to see the internal structure of its eye. This is something that has never been done before. By studying the eye of the trilobite, scientists realised it's almost exactly the same as that of modern bees, crustaceans and dragonflies. Trilobites lived on Earth and were wiped out before the dinosaurs even came around. They were tiny arthropods with some tiny specimens only a millimetre in length that lived in the water and were related to modern insects and spiders. They were some of the earliest invertebrates of their kind. But what's amazing is that after finally seeing the eye structure of a trilobite, scientists learned that they had such efficient vision that over the next 429 million years, other arthropods didn't really need to adapt much. The internal eye structure of this family of animals has remained the same for 500 million years. It must be a pretty successful ocular design to last that long, don't you think? Number 8. Sea dragon. A British fossil hunter recently discovered a previously unidentified sea dragon on the English coast. Steve Etches found the immaculately preserved fossil of an ichthyosaur stuck in limestone at a place called the Jurassic Coast in Dorset. He handed the fossil over to scientists at the University of Portsmouth, who then spent a year working with it before they finally identified it as an entirely new species. According to their findings, the Ichthyosaurus lived around 150 million years ago. It's been named the Etches sea dragon after its discoverer. That's pretty cool, don't you think? Wouldn't you love to have a species named after you? What better way is there to be remembered for all time? Sounds pretty incredible to me. Experts say that in the United Kingdom alone, they have identified at least 5 different species of ichthyosaur to date from the late Jurassic period. The reason they're called sea dragons is because they have extremely large eyes and teeth. They were highly adapted underwater predators who glided through the water using their tail for propulsion instead of fins. They hunted fish and squid, with the largest of them being in North America. The largest ichthyosaur skull ever found was nearly 15 feet or 4.5 metres long. This newest ichthyosaur is the smallest ever discovered, making it more of a baby sea dragon. Number 7. Extinct crocodile. In the middle of the Australian outback, a new crocodile species has been discovered. Of course, this crocodile has been extinct for millions of years. Its skull was dated at being 8 million years old, though these ferocious creatures probably roamed the Australian continent as far back as 25 million years ago. What's truly fascinating is that according to Adam Yates, the Senior Curator of Earth Sciences at the Museum and Art Gallery of the Northern Territory, this ancient crocodile is of absolutely no relation to modern crocodiles. Modern crocodiles only recently arrived in Australia and actually began life in Africa. They only immigrated to Australia a couple of million years ago. This new crocodile was very similar in size to the modern saltwater crocodile, but it may have been even stronger. The sheer size of its skull suggests a thickly muscled monster with deep jaws and especially massive teeth. It was probably a specialist in eating large flightless birds that used to live in Australia. To give you a good idea of just how strong the crocodile was, these birds that it preyed upon were about 9 feet or 3 metres tall and weighed upwards of 1,400 pounds. That's over 650 kilos. Unfortunately, the crocodile hasn't been given a name yet. It's expected to be unveiled as a new species in 2022. Number 6. Armoured shark. Sharks are scary, right? They glide through the water, ready to strike if they think you'd make a good meal. But one of their weaknesses is their soft bodies, as many people know. You can try to punch a shark in its face, and if you're in luck, you may be able to get it to go away. But what if the shark had armour? That would make it an even deadlier threat, right? Check this out. Yet another amazing new species has been found off the Jurassic coast of Dorset in England. This time, scientists discovered an armoured shark. The shark dates back 150 million years and has been classified as a very rare fossil. It belonged to an extinct group of animals known as Hybodontiform, which were close prehistoric relatives to our modern sharks. The fossil was discovered stuck in a slab of rock and then taken to the Museum of Jurassic Marine Life. What makes this fossil so rare is that it's the only one of its kind ever to be found. No other specimens of this extinct shark have been uncovered by paleontologists. They don't actually know what the shark looked like or how it behaved, though they know it was definitely covered in something similar to armour plating. Picture a huge fish covered in armour scales with rows of shark teeth like a great white shark, but even more terrifying. Number 5. Ancient camel. Camels are already funny looking animals, but a fossilised ancient camel in Colorado? This one was surprising. In late 2020, the fossil of a very strange ancient camel was discovered during some construction work. The construction crew were working in the area around Brighton Boulevard in Denver when they found a large group of fossils spanning a time between 2.6 million and 11,700 years ago. The most fascinating fossil belonged to the ancient camel. But what did this prehistoric beast look like? It was quite similar to modern camels that you see today. However, the only thing researchers aren't sure about is whether it had a hump. It could have been a humpless camel. But what's really cool is just knowing that camels used to live all across North America. In fact, they lived alongside prehistoric horses and mastodons and even went extinct at around the same time as them, about 10,000 years ago. They died as a result of human hunting and climate change. Ancient humans had absolutely no reservations about taking their spears and attacking these odd-looking animals, it seems. Number 4. Dinosaur bird. The very tiny fossil of a prehistoric baby bird recently discovered is helping experts to understand how exactly avian creatures came into existence. It's sort of cute, if you use your imagination and think about what it must have looked like when it was still alive. The fossil dates back to something during the Mesozoic era, which was between 250 and 65 million years ago. To date, it's the smallest avian fossil ever discovered from this era. It came from a group of extinct birds called Enantiornithes and was smaller than your pinky finger. But here's what makes this fossil so important. The chick died almost immediately after it was born. This has enabled researchers to analyse the bird's bone structure in the middle of its development. Understanding how extinct animal bones develop can help scientists learn a lot about their lives. And according to Dr. Fabian Knoll from the University of Manchester, they can even learn about a certain animal's evolutionary traits. But this fossil was tricky because of its tiny size. The team had to use synchrotron radiation to observe the microstructures inside of the bones. They discovered that the bird's sternum was still made of cartilage and hadn't yet developed into solid bone, meaning it wouldn't have been able to fly. Now, that's something scientists kind of expected, but it was still a success to be able to actually prove it. After all, birds today typically can't fly immediately after birth. Scientists were able to determine that ancient avian species were just as varied as ours are today, even within the same family. Number 3. Ancient mysterious mammals. The oldest mammal footprints ever found petrified on a beach date back 58 million years, but you'll never guess where the mammal footprints were found. They were discovered in Wyoming, stomped into the rock seemingly in the middle of nowhere. Of course, millions of years ago, this would have been a beach, a place where mammals gathered during the Paleocene era. Wyoming was technically beachfront property back then, since the Gulf of Mexico covered a much larger area and a huge portion of both Montana and Wyoming were underwater. Wouldn't you have liked to live on coastal property in southern Wyoming? Imagine that. It was probably a beautiful place to live, if not for all the giant animals wandering around. What's really fascinating is that paleontologists have been working to discover bones and fossils in the area for over 30 years, but had never bothered looking for footprints. It was a bit of a shock when they realised they had been walking over proof of extinct animals without even realising it. It wasn't until the sun hit the footprints at just the right angle that one of the researchers from the Texas A&M Natural Resources Institute spotted the tracks. Once he saw a few, it was easy to pick out the rest. After extensive research, we now know the tracks were left by at least 2 different animals. One of them was a large mammal about the size of a grizzly bear with 5 toes. The other animal had 4 toes. The 5-toed prints were probably made by some kind of coryphodon, which was like a semi-aquatic hippopotamus. The other prints were likely made by a type of hoofed animal loosely related to deer and elk. However, the prints never matched anything from the fossil records, meaning they could both belong to new species previously undiscovered. There's just no way of knowing by only looking at the footprints. Number 2. Giant burrowing bat. The fossilised remains of one of the scariest rodents ever has just been found by a team of scientists in New Zealand. This was a giant burrowing bat that lived in the country almost 19 million years ago. And if you thought modern bats were scary, this one is 3 times the size of most bats on Earth today, making it a literal nightmare creature. Burrowing bats are actually quite fascinating. They live only in New Zealand and are strange because they fly, scurry across the forest floor on their hands and feet like dogs, and make their own burrows. They're quite fascinating. Even more amazing is that some of them are still alive today, although they are getting pushed towards extinction. Burrowing bats are related to vampire bats, frog-eating bats, and even fishing bats, all of which belong to a bat superfamily that once dominated Australia, New Zealand, and South America. That was 50 million years ago, when all 3 pieces of land were still connected. And just like how the land masses were significantly different back then, so too were the bats. Number 1. Dinosaur tail. One of the coolest fossils ever was recently discovered in Mexico. The fossil is that of a dinosaur's tail, almost perfectly preserved. It's an uncanny find that was made by a team of archaeologists working with the Natural Institute for Anthropology and History. The find was made in Coahuila and is the first of its kind in Mexico. It also might be the best preserved tail of any dinosaur in the world. The tail measures over 15 feet or 4.5 metres and was likely half the length of the dinosaur it was attached to. What dinosaur was that? Researchers say that it was probably the tail of a hadrosaurid, a type of duck-billed dinosaur that lived 72 million years ago. Other than the animal's tail, scientists also found its hips, though nobody's sure where the rest of its body went. Maybe it was eaten by a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Thanks for watching. Which one of these animal attacks do you think was the most tragic? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like these. Catch you on the next video, and if you see one, maybe don't pet the tiger.